Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. This morning we have our Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee. We will continue discussing operating budgets and have one other item from the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice that we will be discussing today. So we'll start with them and then we'll move on to our Office of Grants Management. I will turn it over to our central staff, Ms. Mindy Singleton, to walk through the packet.
Hi, good morning, Chair Stewart, Council Members Katz and Evans. Yes, we are here to talk about the operating budget for the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice. I will talk about the executive summary and then the budget. So the county executive recommends an increase of $90,331 or 5.39% from the FY26 approved operating budget for the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice. The county executive's budget includes no items that must be placed on the reconciliation list per the council's budget approach. The increases recommended for ORASJ consist entirely of compensation adjustments and non-discretionary operating expenses. The operating budget equity tool analysis scores ORASJ with an 11, indicating that ORASJ has a proactive and strategic commitment to advancing racial equity and social justice. I'll say a little bit about that in a minute. And then with respect to the summary of the FY27 recommended budget, the general fund is $1,766,779, or a change from the FY26 budget of 5.39%. Personnel costs $1,526,780, or an increase of 6.2% for 8.5 FTEs. And the operating costs $239,999, or 0.7 increase from the FY26 approved budget. With respect to the department background, those are at Circle 2. And then a little bit more about the operating equity tool, equity budget tool, the OBET, just indicates effective leadership of the countywide implementation of the RESJ Act in Montgomery County, and undertaking numerous GARE framework activities, and enables other departments through its trainings, technical assistance tools, analysis, and expertise to do so. And I think you all know that GARE is the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. Again, with respect to the budget items, I just shared those with you. Again, there are no changes that are required to be placed on the reconciliation list, and the staff recommends approving the budget as recommended by the county executive.
Great. Thank you so much for that overview. I'll first turn it over to Director Ward if you have anything you want to share with us. Pretty straightforward budget, and then we'll open up to colleagues for questions.
Sure. Just want to express that we are, as our 8.5 fully staffed team, I think are ably implementing the racial equity and social justice law. We, of course, have our policy team who implements our operating budget tool, our capital improvement tool, as well as write our RIAs. We have a training team that has put together, now we've created about 11 trainings, most of which are delivered, facilitated by our team with the help of one contractor, and are also available via self-guided training, meaning you can get online and take those trainings when and however you would like. And our newest component is our community engagement folks, and we have a community engagement team that is putting together a community engagement tool in our effort to implement the community engagement phase of the law, as well as reacting to the OLO report on community engagement in the county overall. Feel confident about our work. Happy to answer any questions that you may have about any piece of the work that we are in charge of implementing.
Great, thank you. And I look forward when we're not in budget to have you back again. This spring got a little busy, but it's always nice to have you all back when we're not deep in budget to explore some of the work you're doing. And I think especially with the community engagement work, that Office of Legislative Oversight report we got was very well done, and being able to actually implement some of that is great. One question I had, and I'll turn it over to colleagues, is just wanted to dig into the operating equity budget tool and see from your perspective how that has gone. I think for our committee, we've discussed it with the departments that come before the committee. We're glad to see many of our departments that come before us are getting a score of a 7 or more, and those that are more in the 6 range and lower really have identified some of the issues in terms of what they have to document and things they need to do. I think this committee is hearing less from departments who are smaller, that they're running into issues with trying to figure it out, and they're working with your office and other departments to move forward. So I think that is a movement in a good direction. I think in past years we've heard more from especially some of our smaller departments, that they were really struggling, and I think we're hearing less of that this year. So yeah, would like to know like how you thought it went this year, and curious to know why we went back to scores, because last year we didn't do scores, so just curious about that.
Sure. I will say that I think that overall the county has a higher comfort level. That departments have a higher comfort level with the tool. We changed the tool, we tweaked the tool just a little bit every year, but quite frankly, the GARE framework remains, right? How are you normalizing, operationalizing, and organizing in this space? And so we feel like people are becoming used to this type of inquisition, and also putting together better responses, meaning really talking to us about what they're doing and how they're doing it. They're also, we can tell, some folks are just, quite frankly, embedding it more in their work. We find that some of the bigger departments are taking some of this on and not necessarily waiting for us to provide some of the training and provide some of the guidance on this, which we welcome. We also see that folks are putting in their own resources, which we also applaud. We are a small but mighty team, but we don't have the type of resources that we can be all things to everybody. We went back to scores this year after going through our debrief. We do a debrief every year where we reach out to all of our departments and ask them to either fill out a survey or come to talk to us about the tool, how they use the tool, whether or not it was easy for them, what was difficult, what they liked and didn't like. And quite frankly, we heard that folks wanted the scores. And so we brought back the scores, as I think people felt like it was an easier measure for them. We did, though, encourage folks to use the SWOT analysis that we put out last year as a guide when they are doing their work, and we continue to do the analysis of their work and the narrative justification. We have literally, I think we have a survey out right now that closes on Monday to help us, think about how this year's tool went. So we will continue to iterate. We'll continue to talk to offices. We always provide guidance, training, and one-on-one support for departments who have to do the tool. And then folks can reach out to their portfolio analysts anytime they would like, and they do.
Great, thank you for that. Councilmember Evans?
Sure. So thank you to Councilmember Stewart for, just starting the conversation. I was going to go to the obit and see if it was in this section or the next one. But I do think it is a very useful tool that we have for departments to use. I hope it never goes away, that we don't have the gaps. And so in listening to your response to Councilmember Stewart, because I don't have any context in terms of how it has been over the years. So for me, it just, whereas you all can see that it's been a good progression, to me, when I think about that, the Racial Equity and Social Justice Act was it it went into law in 2019, right? And I don't know how soon after the scores came along, but in thinking about how long this has been in place, I think I just would kind of expect some people just to be higher in their numbers. But I did empathize with some of the departments that said that their staff were small, and so it's just harder for them to get a higher score with all the work that they have to do. So my question is, I had a couple of thoughts. Do you all take a look at the departments where you feel like it's just really important that the number get closer to like 11, like, right? And then work with them. And then I did hear you just say that your staff is small, but with your background and your knowledge, it seems like there could be, or possibly should be, some coaching to help some people, because I don't know, from what I was reading in some of the in the packet, and then listening to people saying that they have to go back and implement. I don't know if it's a hard start for some people, if it's hard for them to kind of get off the ground, if they actually really understand what that work looks like. So I'll let you respond to that, and then I have another question I want to ask in terms of funding.
Well, I will say we ask the question in our tool every year, what are the barriers to you doing this effectively?
Okay.
And this year we quantified 53% of folks said that staffing and capacity, right, was a barrier. They said that resources, 45% said resources was a barrier. 33% said other. Some folks said regulatory compliance. There were external factors, infrastructure, or change management. So we are aware that there are many barriers to doing this work maybe as effectively as some folks would like. We have tried to provide as much support as we can for the operating budget tool. We also do the capital improvement tool, and we also do RIAs. And we have 3 policy analysts and myself, and I double as a policy analyst during our budget season, which feels like it's protracted these days. So we do targeted trainings around our tool. The county is a member of GARE, meaning the Government Alliance for Race and Equity. And there are many, many resources through GARE. And then we do ask or request that some folks look into the own issue areas, meaning, perhaps transportation has an association that helps them do this with the lens towards racial equity, meaning transportation. The same for various other issue areas. Do we do coaching? I think that what we do is coaching, but we don't do. We are not providing coaching ongoing in a way that's like, come here once a week and we'll talk about this, that, and the other. But if you have a project, a plan, or something you would like to implement, we absolutely sit down with departments to do that. And we've done that with Ag, we've done that with DEP on their climate justice work. So when folks come to us with a particular project, we staff that project, and sometimes it's for a long time. We staff the climate justice work for probably what feels like maybe almost a year. So yeah, we do provide those services and just add it to our portfolio.
Okay. And so that was not me dumping on you all, saying that you're not doing enough. No. Like, I think you all are excellent. I'm just trying to figure out how
folks can get where they want to go.
Right. And you know what? And so then my second question was this, because I don't know if it came across to the panelists yesterday. Because I started off, and sometimes my mind might be wandering, but for the community engagement cluster, their score was a 6. But what I thought was, looking at their budget, like their budget was, in my opinion, was being almost, I don't want to say zeroed out, but a lot of things that could help them to do the work were not going to be in their budget. So that, I asked the question, like, your score is a 6. Looking at the reductions, is this going to further impact your OBIT score, and they didn't actually answer it. And I understand the situation that they're in, and I'm putting them on the spot. But when I go to, when I look at your packet and how you have the breakout and staffing, how you just went over the percentages, the staffing capacity, resources, is there a way that that could be just attached to each of the departments so that you can actually really see? Because that's a question that you don't have to ask the departments when they come before, that you can actually see that, okay, so for community engagement cluster, if I said that correctly, their score could be tied to staffing, resources, because I do feel like the budget could have an impact on what people or what departments are not able to do or what they're able to do. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, the budget does. And so we try to make note of that in the narrative justification and in our analysis. Whether or not we think that more time, staff time, money, and other resources would strengthen their ORESJ commitment. So we try to write that. And I'll be really honest, we hope that folks use our analysis to make the case for their own budgets.
Right.
Because
That's what I
it
felt like
is
people were doing.
work to do this work. It is not cheap to do this work. It is not, and it is not work that should just be done by my office. And so in order for it to be embedded across the county, it should be embedded in the resources of other departments. So while we don't necessarily attach it to the number, it is clear, I think, in our narrative justification and analysis how we feel like their resources can or have been used to strengthen their racial equity commitment.
Because what I don't want to do as a council member is inadvertently short people money that they actually really need to do the work that we say is really important to us. And so do people actually really know? Like, do they really get us, like, do they know that these scores could, like,
I think so.
Applying the, okay, because I
think so. I think that, oh, that's interesting. Whether or not folks use it that way, I am not sure, but I am very clear that, you know, if you are asking for us to serve a particular population, whether they are unhoused, bus dependent, and things of that sort, and then you are going to cut those particular services, you should understand that you are cutting the services of the very people you purport or want to help. And I think that that case can be made both here and on the executive side. So, yeah.
Right. I'd like to see more of that come through.
Yeah, and I think Councilmember Evans, you're pointing out a really interesting sort of timing question, I think, as well. And maybe this is something, you know, we can tackle in the future when Director Ward, you come back, because correct me if I'm wrong, people's OBIT scores are basically, you're looking at that analysis before the budget is finalized. Like, you're looking at all those reports, and they're not necessarily, you're not doing an analysis of their final budgets and what is being proposed to add or cut.
We're doing an analysis of proposed enhancements and sometimes reductions. Okay. So we talk about whether or not, you know, that is going to impact. But we're talking, and for the departmental budget, we talk about how they're using their resources, where and how they are making those resources, I won't say known, but how it's working to implement racial equity and social justice. And then we're also, if they are saying to us, we are doing this, we're saying, well, if you did that, if you do this, then perhaps this would bolster your work. And then we say more resources may be needed to do that.
Right. And so if I can just add one other thing. And then I don't know if we can or we should also go a couple steps further. You know, legislation impacts how things will be operationalized as well. And so when colleagues are introducing bills, when it comes to committee, I think that somebody should be sitting here with, like, at every committee meeting where a bill is being introduced to talk about the racial equity and so the impact. Because I think that people need to think about, like, sometimes bills sound good, but if you get into the details of it, it could
Yeah, it could have some unintended consequences.
Right. So I don't know if we strengthen it through that way too.
Yeah, the Office of Legislative Oversight does that for, we don't really put our tentacles in the legislative piece. We let OLO do that work with the ResGs, and I think that is the intention of ResGs, is to do just that.
Okay.
But with respect to the operating budget equity tool, they are described in every single staff report. We've also moved that up to the top so that you all are looking at that the analysts are talking about that, and then we also attach the entire analysis to the reports as well, and we hope that the council members talk about that as well.
You sure do, and I don't want to discount the work that you do. I have tasked Pam Luckett in the office at looking at all the racial equity statements when bills come through, because I don't want to impact communities even further. Yeah. So I guess this is like a notice to my colleagues publicly. I've said it, individually to people, that this is really important to me. This is a big thing that I am looking at when I see bills. I'm reading that, and I'm making sure people in the office are tagging me to let me know, because I don't want to do anything to further harm our residents. I've been trying to do listening sessions to see how people are experiencing Montgomery County, and people are experiencing Montgomery County in very, very, very different ways. Mm-hmm. And I know we know that, you hear the stories, but it's just different. So I've taken up a lot of time, but that's just, thank you for the work that you do, and I hope you continue to do.
Thank you. Can I just say one more thing about what the OBETs include? So one of the things that they include are examples of how different departments can work with us. So the county council, for example, as you know, the legislative branch does have 3 very small offices, OSA, BOA, and the Merit System Protection Board. And also included in the OBET analysis for the Merit System Protection Board was a discussion about working with the Office of Human Rights, for example. So really talking about, working cross sectors, cross departments, about how they can work, help each other.
Thank you. Councilmember Katz.
Thank you, Mary, very much, Madam President. I did think it was noteworthy that you all got an 11 for your, in one thing I could make a joke. In another statement, it shows that you not only walk the walk, you talk the talk. And that in itself speaks volumes, and I applaud that. And I also want to thank you for the training that you're doing, not only for the various departments, but for the council in general. Gone through it several times, and each one has brought a different enlightenment, I think, for all of us in different ways, which is, and we, talk about it and figure it out that way. So that in itself speaks those volumes. I also think that it speaks well of the various departments that come before us, and they're saying, look, you got a 6 out of an 11, and you got, and somebody says, well, that really wasn't fair, and they didn't, we didn't communicate well, whatever. And that speaks well of them because they're annoyed. If they didn't care, they wouldn't be annoyed. And so I think all of this is working together. It's taken a while for us to get here, but we're here. And to the point of the idea about combining departments for the smaller departments to get training, I think that is an idea that really should be figured out. The problem is everybody has these schedules, and everybody's, working 24/7. So when are they going to fit them in, and how are you going to, get the groups together? But that is a good idea. And the whole idea about having somebody sit here, I can tell you, as much as we want, we get the equity statements, but as much as we want company when we're up here, I don't know that that's the best way to have your time taken up, to actually sit with us on each piece of legislation. So I applaud you. I thank you for what you're doing. And I think the departments in general have gained so much because of it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Katz. Thank you, Councilmember Evans. I think those were excellent points that we raised, and I think each year we talk about how do we move forward and make sure we're including discussion of the racial equity and social justice work in all of our work, and we will continue to do that. But I appreciate you also teasing out and thinking about how we can bring that more in, especially when cuts are being proposed to different departments. So. Awesome. All right. So I think on the budget piece of it, we're good to go. And thank you for that. The next item that we kind of tagged on to our budget discussions is that related to all this, we received Executive Regulation 30-25, a resolution to extend the deadline for the racial equity action plans. Racial equity action plans for each department were part of the 2019 resolution on racial equity that was passed in 2019. And so I think Ms. Mendy Singleton, I'll first pass it over to you just to kind of level set us and give us some background, what was and obviously Director Ward, please chime in, what initially was the purpose of the action plans, what were they supposed to include, and then for either one of you, I'd be curious, I didn't see in the packet how many departments are completed, if we had that, and where's the gap right now and the need for this extension. So I'll first turn it over to Ms. Mendy Singleton.
Sure, thank you. So in terms of the background, so the Racial Equity and Social Justice Act was passed in 2019, as you know, and just after that, there was an executive regulation in July of 2022, which Executive Regulation 1521, which talked about how the departments and the offices would complete equity plans in 2025. What has most recently been the request that came over on March 25th, 2026, that was transmitted from the county executive to the county council, and that's at Circle 1, a request to expand that, to extend the date until 2027. And you'll also see that at the executive regulation on line 8.1 from 2025 to 2027. So what is being proposed here is a regulation under Method 2, which means that the council can approve or disapprove within 60 days, but we're here now, within 60 days. There's also a fiscal statement that I've included, which indicates that the proposed regulation will not impact county revenues or expenditures or staff time or duties or IT or the enterprise resource planning. I've also included a draft resolution at Circle 9, and the council staff is recommending that the council approve the Executive Regulation 3025 to extend the deadline for racial equity action plans.
Thanks. Director Ward?
Sure. As Ms. Mendy Singleton said, part of the law and the regulations of 2019 was that departments produce a REAP, which is a Racial Equity Action Plan, by December 2025. We have seen about 10 departments come in and in various stages of completion of their Racial Equity Action Plans. Actually, one of the questions that they're asked in their OBET is where they are in their REAPs. And so we had a meeting probably last spring with departments and figured that most folks were not going to complete their REAPs by 2025 and then decided to ask for an extension to help them do such. We will, meeting the Department of Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice, will provide a template, will provide training, will provide technical assistance and a guidance manual for the remaining departments who have not completed their REAPs. Some offices have completed their REAPs with outside assistance, including the council office, where there was a real inclusion cohort and various other consultants that have helped them do their REAPs. We have worked with departments as soon as last week, talking about where they are headed and putting in their REAPs. So we would talk about goals, we would talk about the implementation timeline, we would talk about data and capturing and ownership of of all the goals and the intermediate steps in those racial equity action plans. I do believe that the deadline that we've offered in the amendment should suffice. And I believe that the support that we would offer should get everybody to that goal.
Great. And if you could just tell us, the process the departments go through. It sounds like there's a back and forth between.
So there could be some
you and the
iteration
department.
for
Yeah.
sure. So we are actually launching the template, and so folks will then start with goals, timeline, ownership, whether or not there's community engagement, what the level of community engagement is for this goal. Then they would. It's a 2 or 3 year REAP, meaning these are goals that you can complete in that 2 or 3 year time. You would iterate that. You would work on that internally within your department. A goal could be, let me think about, it could be higher community engagement on particular tasks or particular, within a particular division. And then you would work on that for that 2 years, making sure that you're capturing what those engagements are, deciding what level of engagement you would like, who's in charge of that, what resources are needed to get you to that goal, and then how are you capturing, the success of that goal, the success according to the community, what that looks like, right? So both quantitative and qualitative data, and we would work with the team or could work with departments to do any or all of that, depending on their need, or they could do most of that in-house or bring in others to help implement their plan.
Great. And I feel like I should know the answer to this question, but I don't know how we define departments for sake of this. Actually, how many departments do we have?
Departments, for the sake of this legislation, it's legislative and executive departments is how it's laid out. And so when we define it, we have about 41 departments.
Okay. Thank you. That's helpful.
I know there's been a lot of questions about why our judicial branch does not get an OBET and all that, but it's because the legislation is very clear and it says executive and legislative branches.
Yeah. Great. So we have we're like 1/4 of the way there.
Right.
Okay.
And folks I'll be really honest, folks are, they're chomping at the bit and wanting assistance and wanting some more support here. And so we'll provide that for them.
Great. All right. Councilmember Evans?
So great explanation. I appreciate that because I was coming into this thinking that in the 2 years, will we actually be further along?
Yeah.
Okay. But
Absolutely.
based on what you said, no, I feel very confident. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Great. Councilmember Katz?
Yes. And what I'm saying is it says you're changing from 2025
Yep.
to 2027.
Yes.
So does that mean January 1st, 2027? Does that mean?
That's a great question. That's a
December?
great question. And so we did not, it just said spring 2027, I believe. And so when but we actually started the process for the extension many months before it got over here. And so
Right.
sometimes bureaucracy being what it is, the cushion, we just kind of set it in. We are happy to set a final date if that would make it easier for you and easier to pass this amendment.
I think we'd be better off to do that. Part of the problem, and I'm fine extending,
Sure.
but part of the problem with extending is somebody says, it's the night before the exam.
Yeah.
So I think there should be a date certain.
Sure.
And then see how this thing goes.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can do that.
Good. Just so we follow our processes, since this is method 2, Ms. Mendy Singleton, how do we do that? Have a date certain, yeah, because it didn't come to us with a date certain.
Right.
So, your microphone's off. Sorry. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you're right. It didn't come to us with a date, to you with a date certain. And I'm just wondering if that could go into the proposed resolution. As you all were asking the questions, I actually wrote December in here. I don't know if that, and just make it December 31st, 2027 in the resolution.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine with us. Just to make sure that we can do that.
I will
and,
find out.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
double check, since these are method 2, if we can make that in the resolution and that all works. But I think we appreciate the update. And if before this does go before full council, if there were any numbers on, I guess we have 10. We have 41 is our universe, 10 complete. If there was any estimate of how many are like on their way.
So I think there were 10 on their way. So
Okay.
I will, and then I think by the time this is full council, there will be folks who are kind of showing their hands. Not everybody has reached out and said we're working on this. So we can take a survey and find out where everyone is in their cycle. Of completing
I
this.
think that would just be helpful just to document it.
Okay.
When we do this at full council, the extension,
Sure.
especially given there's going to be so much transition in the executive office and here, I think taking this action, which is, as you can hear, the committee agrees with, but being able to document this point in time where we are, so that as we move forward, whoever is sitting in these seats easily sees that.
Yeah. Fair.
Great.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
All right. Well, we will recommend this to full council and double check if we can get the time certain in there. So, all right. Thank you, Director Ward. Please tell your whole team we very much appreciate your work, and we look forward to having you back again after budget to kind of dig into other work you're doing. So,
Looking forward
thank
to
you,
it.
Ms.
Thank you.
Mindy Singleton, for that. All right. We are going to now, we have 3 budget items that all kind of fall under the Office of Grants Management, and we have Ms. Clemens Johnson on our team coming down, and Director Murphy. And the first, I'm sorry, I'm all confuzzled here. All right, yes, the first is the Community Grants NDA. Do you want to start there, Ms. Clemens Johnson? Is that?
Certainly, sorry.
Yes, okay, let's
Shuffle
start
of
there.
papers over here. Good morning. We are starting with agenda number 3, the FY27 operating budget for the Community Grants NDA. And I want to thank the team from OMB and Director Murphy for providing information to support the changes and provide detail. So the county executive is recommending an increase of $301,283 or 2.25% from the FY26 approved operating budget from the Community Grants NDA. The recommendation includes $1.5 million in programmatic additions that the committee should consider. Based on the council president's guidance, this item will go on the rec list for final decision making by the council. And so this is for the $1.5 million for the nonprofit federal resiliency grants. There are several reductions that are listed in the NDA, and you will see in your packet here, there are 5 altogether, and we will go through them in detail. These items do not go on the rec list. However, the committee can weigh in if they want to accept those reductions or question them or add them as part of the reconciliation list. So for the NDA, there is also a 2-point inflationary adjustment recommended to the nonprofit service provider contracts or grants in this respect for $297,097. But per the council president's guidance, all the proposed inflationary adjustments will be reviewed by full council. So council staff, as requested by the council president, identified a potential reduction of $500,000. And so as we comb through the budget items, we will get to that. Are there any questions before I proceed? Okay, so I will quickly go through just some background information to give the committee context. On page 2 is listed the item by item changes for FY27 that are recommended for FY27. And then there is background on the Community Grants NDA on pages 2. Most recently, the GO Committee met on March 19th to discuss the recommendations of the advisory work group on a strategic plan for county grants. I think overall, the work group highlighted the need to transition from what they kind of called a fragmented program by program grant making approach to a more unified and policy driven system. There were several recommendations for legacy grants. For example, there was a request that those be phased out and eventually canceled. There was a proposal that a county community grants board be established to provide ongoing strategic guidance and set annual funding priorities for the community grants NDA in general based on community needs. And they thought that would help strengthen transparency and accountability in that process. And then lastly, there was a recommendation to address standardizations across grant programs. So, and they more so pointed to the model of the CIP cost sharing grants, where there's like clear criteria, timelines that correlate with the state funding, and a more consistent evaluation process. And so from the committee's work, I think the committee, the committee certainly recognized all the work and time that the work group had put into the report and identified it as a foundation for long-term reform. So I believe the work group is planning to meet again once things are resolved with budget and kind of just have some closeout discussions about what's going on. And I believe Nonprofit Montgomery is also hosting a work session to kind of highlight the findings of the work group. 28th, I believe. Okay, yes. So everyone is still engaged and still very excited about this work and helping to make recommendations to the committee and council about improvements to the community grants NDA. So before we go into budget items, I will stop there and see if there's any questions.
I don't have any questions, but Director Murphy, before we get into any of the specific budget items, did you have anything you wanted to share with us? Or
Thank you. Rafael Pumlejo Murphy, Director of the Office of Grants Management. For the Community Grants NDA, I have no introductory remarks, nothing really to add to previous GO committee sessions, the work session that we had, I think just a few weeks ago on the work group's outcome. So when we get to my budget, I'll have more things to go through. But on this, no real changes or recommendations from what I've said before.
Great, thank you. And I'll just note that as part of the work group's recommendations, and just want to thank everyone again who participated in that. We are looking at and have had some conversations with representatives of the county exec's office on thinking about in this window of time that we have, again, the theme of there's great changes afoot on the council and the county exec's office, and figuring out what can be accomplished in that window of time, but understanding the great need to address some of these issues and really appreciate the work group for lifting them up. So those conversations have continued as after we had that work session on March 19th. So I think we can continue.
Awesome. So we will start on page 4. There is a table including the FY27 CE recommended budget changes. As mentioned, only one item is considered for the rec list. Well, not considered, is required to go on the rec list. And the committee can weigh in on how they would like to manage this item. So this is for the nonprofit federal resiliency grants in the amount of $1.5 million. So the executive has recommended continuation of the nonprofit federal resiliency grants for $1.5 million. That was initially funded through the November 2025 special appropriation, the public service support package for $7.75 million. Of that $7.75, $1.5 million was appropriated for this new program, with the goal of helping support nonprofits that had experienced canceled or delayed federal funding due to the federal government shutdown that had happened at that time that lasted 43 days. The grant program awards were intended to support core operating and salary costs and other needs of the organization. So the grant NOFO was released November 28, 25. OGM received 11 applications, an additional for the priority deadline, an additional 10 applications prior to the program's close. So the OGM did share some observations, is that they were surprised at the number of applications, so there were 21 in total, and that they found the organizations to be partially or fully ineligible, that many of the applicants could not demonstrate that they had federal funding or that their federal funding had been impacted or they sought to replace federal program dollars, even though the funding legislation specifically limited what could be supported. So the process for OGM in reviewing the applications and trying to distinguish what was eligible versus ineligible expenses was essential to assure accurate proposal evaluation had contributed to delays in award determinations. So as of April 2026, OGM is in the final stages of making award recommendations to the CAO. We put to page 5. There was OGM, I'll let Raphael kind of talk through those details. But under the current NOFO, there are some organizations that just weren't eligible to apply because the absence of dollars hadn't really been felt yet when the NOFO was put out there. So basically, like, it's coming, they had gotten continuation of funds. And so it was noted that the executive did recommend this funding, noting that anticipating the funding landscape ahead of time and that there hadn't been like an immediate loss of dollars, but recognizing that for many of the organizations, it was likely in the pipeline. So OGM plans to release, if this funding is approved, OGM plans to release a revised NOFO that would allow for consideration of projected rather than solely demonstrated loss of federal funding. So council staff's recommendations, I listed 2 options, but you all have all the options you want to consider. So those are to concur with the executive's recommendation, or based on the council president's guidance on reductions, the committee could consider reducing the grant amount by $500,000 for a total of $1 million. I just noted that a $1 million allocation will provide consistency, equity, and some kind of fiscal discipline across the community grants NDA portfolio when it came to nonprofit programs outside of the community grants NDA and legacy grant. So like the nonprofit technical assistance grants and things like that, their base funding is $1 million. But we do know over in prior years, we have done special appropriations to add funds for those programs too when their base has been $1 million. So in trying to find reductions, that was my recommendation. But I will stop there and see if there's any questions, or Raphael would, or if the committee would like Raphael to speak on any of the items.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Clemens-Johnson. Appreciate your work on this. Director Murphy, I get, one question I had is, I see in the packet that as of the 20th, you're in the final stages of making the award recommendations. At that time, will the 1.5 that was appropriated this fall, will you make all those grants and use all the 1.5 given what was reported in terms of the applicants for that?
We don't know yet. The level that has been transmitted to the CAO for approval doesn't use all the 1.5. We are sitting still, or we're not sitting on, we're working through the non-priority deadline applications. So once we finish those and evaluate those, it's possible those could use up the entire 1.5, but the current amount that's been recommended to the CAO does not reach that 1.5 threshold. Okay. So again, it's the amount requested does very much exceed that 1.5, but as the packet states, there were a lot of ineligible expenses, ineligible applications. Folks who applied for a federal grant didn't get it is not replacement of funds, right? Or they had won something under the Biden administration or applied under the Biden administration, didn't get it. It's not adverse federal actions is there. So so separating those has been a tricky part of it. Mm-hmm. So we are reviewing those non-priority deadline applications, and we'll send up a second CAO decision memo. And if it totals up to 1.5 million, yes. If not, then there would be money left over. At that point, we would probably open up the application again. Mm-hmm. And as I talked about, making it more flexible, not just what are you getting hit with right now, but being, okay, demonstrate to us that you are going to be hit, mm-hmm. because that is the feedback. And I did go to the press event that you had when you announced that initiative, and I talked to a number of nonprofits who were expecting one big, beautiful bill impacts. Yeah. Those are not going to hit. Those did not hit immediately. Everyone knows it's coming. It's a big avalanche that is coming, but they haven't hit yet. And so a lot of those folks, when I followed up with them, they said, well, yeah, based on the NOFO, we can't demonstrate impacts yet. We know it's coming, and we can tell you what it's going to be, but it hasn't done yet. So I think that would be more flexibility. It might be a little more challenging to project impacts and demonstrate them, But I mean, it's something that we can handle, and we have a team of federal grants experts on our team. So if anyone can do it, we can.
Great. Thank you. And I just want to say I really appreciate, I can't remember if it's in the packet specifically, or if this is the sections in the cornerstone analysis and how that has been really very helpful as we've been navigating this time, and you sharing that analysis with us. And I just want to extend my thanks to you for your foresight in recommending that that be done and that we have that available to us. So.
I want to express my appreciation to my team who's been coordinating that, working with them and doing that. But yeah, that's been an invaluable tool. And this is where incoming and outgoing grants kind of overlap, and where we see what we learn on the incoming side very much informs the decisions on this. So what nonprofits reported to us was, again, a lot of the attacks that we would see on nonprofit grants from the federal government have largely somewhat started to back off. The federal government's approach now, as outlined in that report, is let's just let these grants run out. And then with our new appropriation, we're able to implement the new priorities, the new criteria, the new things. The cuts that they wanted didn't really materialize. So I think a lot of people are really waiting and seeing with the next tranche of federal funding, us included, us especially, and I'll get to that later, what is that going to look like? So I think it does get to that, okay, let's wait and see, both for our nonprofit partners and us, of what that's going to look like. And that's why the CE wanted this extra money be included, because what is it going to look like 6 months from now? So.
Okay. Any other questions? Councilmember Katz.
And you might have just touched on this, but I just want to double check. Does the federal government, once a grant is actually given, once they've said congratulations, you have it, do they have to follow through for the entire grant? Can they rescind part of that while how does their deal work?
That is actively being fought in the courts on a daily basis. In general summary, if you have a signed grant agreement and if you as a grantee are compliant with that grant agreement, the federal government cannot just terminate you at will. There has to be for cause. So if you're not compliant, you're not submitting your reports, you're not demonstrating the outcomes or whatnot, then if they do have cause, they can terminate that grant. And that's an oversimplification, and the courts have largely supported that, and that if the grantee was doing nothing wrong, then you get to keep those funding, you get to keep implementing it. And we've seen that with our awards, where things that were paused or delayed or under review, climate change grants, all of our climate change related federal grants are going forward. Some of them have been recompeted out as outgoing grants, especially DEP's done some really great work through OGM on that. But you can't do that, you need cause, and the courts are debating that, but generally speaking, that's been supported. What's a little more nuanced is if they give you an award, they send you a letter saying, hey, we want to give you a grant, but you haven't signed the grant yet. That's been a lot trickier, and that you never have the signed grant agreement between you and the federal government, because often there's a negotiation period where you have to come to consensus on the details before both parties actually sign it. But again, the federal government has tried to do a lot of that. They have not been successful. And so, but now they seem to be backing off and just saying, hey, there's only 3 months left on these grants. Let's just let them go. But the federal government has been forced to reinstate grants that they said they were going to terminate.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Evans, any questions at this point? Turn my button up. All right, so I think we will put on the reconciliation list given the council president's guidance, that before we move on, Mr. Murphy, I did want to ask at this point, there was another a grant as part of the supplemental that we did in the fall, I think it was the $750,000, and where that is in the process.
It's in the same, a little bit different spot, but in the same spot. It's the FY26 Nonprofit Strategic Planning Grant Program. And so that was $750,000 was appropriated. Again, new recommendations have been transmitted down to the CAO for approval. That will be completely subscribed and used once those are approved. We had $3 million in applications for $750,000. It was a more flexible pot of money, so we didn't really have the eligibility issues that we did. But again, a lot of needs and a finite pool of resources. So yeah, it's going to be, we'll be using all those funds.
Great. And so your recommendations sit with the CAO at this moment.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for the update. Ms. Clemens Johnson, let's continue.
Okay, thank you. Excuse me. So continuing on page 5 with the other recommended budget changes. So these still need a vote of the committee, and we will proceed with based on whatever your votes are. So there is a reduction recommended for the FY24 underserved community projects winners of $819,545. So this reduction is based on the third and final year of the county's funding commitment for this award. So recipients were reminded during the FY20 renewal process that this was the final year of the award, and they were encouraged to apply for other county grant programs or from other funders to continue their programs. Excuse me. There was, the OGM did highlight that the previous NOFO, because this was one of the first grant programs. Yes, that the Office of Grants Management put out. And this, so it was when we recognized the initial issue of the open grant programs versus more of a targeted grant approach. And so this was those hundreds of applications. I don't know if hundreds is overstating it, but because the scope of programming was so broad that the OGM had to deal with the number of applications, figure out how to score those and make awards. So basically that's just what they're highlighting in this process, is that the Underserved Community Projects Grant was basically a learning experience for the Office of Grants Management in terms of creating more targeted funding. So I will stop there and just see if there's a vote of the committee, but this is just reflective of the term of this grant ending.
Anything to add, Director Murphy? Yeah.
Just one other thing that is highlighted in the packet is that there are, at the time, that was the only kind of program of its kind, really looking at underserved communities in a direct way. And since then, especially HHS has really launched a number of other grant programs that really, even in funding volume, just dwarf the size of this. So the community, the Reconciliation Committee, they've got a significant pot of money of $7 million that's really focused on the same communities. The Youth Mental Health Grant Program that Dr. Davis has been running, again, several $1 million, really targeted at the same thing. And even like the Department of Environmental Protections programs are really targeted in underserved communities. So now you've got a huge number of other options that are more targeted at needs that we've identified within these communities instead of leaving it broad open. So it's not that there aren't funding for these other needs. There's actually more. It's just in other places.
Okay, great. All right, with no objection to
that. We will move to item 2.2 on page 6. The recommended reduction to the FY26 legacy renewals of $508,039. So the legacy of grants, as we know, are historically funded, long-standing community grants that have received recurring county grant funding over multiple fiscal years without reapplying. So these awards existed before the creation of OGM, although they manage them now. And then while competed in so these reflect grantees that did not receive the multi-year community grant award when it was first launched in FY24. So while competed in FY24, the new awards started in FY25. And so the community grants timeline, which is different than the legacy, is FY25 through FY27. So they're in their second year, and FY27 will be their third year. But specifically for this reduction, there was an an evaluation in coordination with the departments in FY26 on the legacy grant, before FY26, on the legacy grant awards based on the implementation of their FY24 and FY25 awards. In total, there were 10 legacy renewal awards that were not recommended for renewal, based for a total reduction of $504,834. In March 2026, an email was sent out to those recipients listing to all renewal recipients, listing the reasons that these awards weren't renewed, and those are detailed in your packet. The council members also received that correspondence, and it was sent to all council members so that if they were notified by different nonprofits that received that award, that they would have some background information about why those decisions have been made. So for just in terms of the number of awards, In FY25, there were 97 awards executed. In FY27, there were 87 awards executed, reflecting that 10 that were not renewed. And so for FY27, we just want to reflect the accuracy is that that funding is no longer needed within the NDA, as those 10 were not renewed, and those recipients were given notice that their renewal would be subject to a review of performance and appropriation. Raphael, I don't know if you have anything to add, if there's any feedback prior to your email, or if there's anything that you would like to share after your email.
I mean, prior to March 15th, the number of calls and emails we got from council members and nonprofits about what's going on with our Legacy Renewal Award are enormous. And because of the budget rules, we cannot get out ahead of the CE. And so we just kind of have to say, wait and see to March 15th. So once March 15th passed, and we could be transparent what his decisions were, we sent that out to council offices to help you guys answer those questions. I'm sure you're getting 10 times more we are. And then also be able to send that out to the recipients, let them know what the next steps would be. And if they want to engage in the council process, there were options to do that as well. So we just made it very transparent, very clear. If the budget rules allowed, we would have sent it out earlier. But, as you know, the CE had a hard budget to develop. So decisions, all came out at once. So, and this was something, if I recall correctly from last year's budget cycle, was something you really wanted, or this committee really wanted, was to make sure we are getting value out of these awards. These awards stretch back to at least FY18, that these people have been getting on these organizations have been getting on a continuous basis. So it's while they've been called legacy renewals for maybe a couple of years, during COVID, it was just community grants, and before that it was just council grants or county executive grants. But all of these organizations begin getting this amount of funding plus the annual inflationary increase for a very, very long time. We have done some work with departments to consolidate some like awards for the same organizations for administrative efficiency, and that's good for them, it's good for us, so we're great with that. But it is, we will be doing the same process this year, and we're just giving folks a heads up.
Thank you, Director Murphy. I very much appreciate all of your work on this. Yes, as you know, this has been an issue that this committee has grappled with over the last few years. And I very much appreciate, again, the working group's recommendation that the legacy grants are ended. I think one of the things that this committee has always struggled with was the timing and when information was provided to these organizations. And so I think I'm glad the work is being done. And I guess one of my questions is, so we have the 10 organizations that will not be renewed. So we have 87 that will continue to FY27. And then after FY27, I mean, again, we're in a transition period. We'll have a new county executive and new folks on the council, but there is no plan in place right now for the legacy grants after FY27.
No.
Okay. So I just want to make that clear for folks that, especially for the 87 organizations that are in this is a conversation we've been having over multiple years of making sure that these are very important organizations that are doing incredible work in our community, as well as we have been transitioning to a different way of doing grants. And so the decision was made to fund them through FY27, and that was a commitment made that I think we'll hold to.
Yep.
So, any other questions on the legacy grants? No? All right. Well, this looks like a good reduction. We'll accept that.
Thank you. Noted. So our next item is 2.3, a recommended reduction to the FY25 community grant winners of $108,230. So this recommendation accounts for two organizations that did not receive renewal awards in FY26. So the first organization rejected a $206,000 award renewal due to lack of success in meeting their goals and metrics within the first year of the award. They did attempt several strategies to improve performance, but ultimately found that the project scope was untenable for them. So they have developed a new strategy, and they will pursue future opportunities with the county once they are able. The second organization is not being offered a $38,017 award renewal, as they have not engaged with OGM despite over 6 months of attempted contact, and have not submitted required activity or financial reports due to organizational and leadership turnover. So the remaining difference in terminated award is accounted for by the inflationary increases that happen year after year, but not in FY27. So.
I guess my question is, so the rewards they rejected were in the FY26. So so I guess the question is, why is the amount 108,000 and not the 206 plus the 38?
Because there's an apples and oranges way
Okay.
that the budget is presented in terms of the FY26, which is the base, includes the inflationary increases, whereas the FY27 for the same line item, all the inflationary increases are pulled out.
Got it.
So when you take the reductions for the individual awards, it looks like that.
Got it. Appreciate that. Thank you. Any questions? Nope. All right, without objection.
Okay. The next item, 2.4 and 2.5, you could talk about them together, but we'll leave them separate, is that the FY26 approved budget included a 3% inflationary increase of $30,000. Because the awards were not finalized, a separate allocation was provided for the FY27 inflationary increase in lump sum for the community grants NDA. Okay, yeah, and same for item 2.5.
All right, we good? Good, all right, without objection.
Okay, and so that closes out the recommended budget changes for the FY27 community grants NDA.
Great, all right, without objection, we'll place as the council president guidance requires, the $1,500 on the reconciliation list and take all the reductions. Thank you.
15,
What did I say?
1,500.
Oh, sorry. Thanks.
Just a rounding.
Just a rounding error.
Million.
I missed a zero there. You know what I meant. Need to look up the coffee. All right, we'll move on now to the overall budget for the Office of Community Grants.
Thank you so much. We would begin with agenda item number 4, the FY27 operating budget for the Office of Community Grants. We are going to make a vote today. The county executive recommends a slight decrease of $2,000 or a negative 0.17% from the FY26 operating budget for the office. Personnel costs comprise of 83% of the budget and a total of 6 FTEs, which is 0 net change in the number of staff from FY26. The executive did not recommend any increase in programmatic or staffing additions, so there is nothing that will need to be added to the reconciliation list that was recommended from the executive. There is a recommendation from the executive to include a shift of $55,482 for other departments to the Office of Grants Management. That is not required to be placed on the reconciliation list, but will need a vote from the committee of consideration. There's also a $74,000 in increase for compensation adjustments. And I'll note that the OBET analysis states that the Office of Grants Management demonstrates a sustained commitment to advancing racial equity and social justice for its staff and Montgomery County Department agencies and nonprofits. I'll leave that there and we'll dig into it as we go through the detailed budget items. So as we go through page 2, there is a chart reflecting the budget changes that I just mentioned, and also reference to the public testimonies that took place April 7th, 8th, and 9th. The council president's approach was included as reference in terms of how we are managing the budget items. There is a department background included on page number 3, which describes the mission of OGM and really their focus in incoming grants and outgoing grants. The team did provide some one-pagers about the work of the incoming grants that are included on your packet on circle pages 9, 10, and 11. And I think they just demonstrate the work, like how the work is managed in terms of inflow and outflow. And so if I'll see if there's any questions about those. Okay. All right. So just wanted to highlight as part of the Community Grants NDA and Office of Grants management, but it seems like it works in tandem. So we're mentioning the committee work session that the GO committee had below, but I won't rehash it in great detail other than the recommendations specifically from the work group for the Office of Grants Management was a long-term consideration of an Office of Nonprofit Relations that could provide extended support to OGM in the departmental grants and like strategic planning, capacity building, and accountability for county-funded nonprofit grant programs. There was a recommendation for additional staff support for OGM to effectively administer and oversee the growing number of grants that OGM manages. So, as they continue to expand their grant portfolio, especially with the additions where the departments, other than the community grants in DA, I think we think of that as the meat and potatoes, if you want to say, of the Office of Grants Management's grant programs, but it is transitioning to where the departments are putting out a lot of grants. And so those are the, unanticipated workload and just receiving and managing the grants requests as they come from the various departments. So challenging to plan, but OGM has been receptive to the requests from the departments. And then from the work group's perspective, there was a focus on outreach. And so they just thought there was a need to have a central point of contact related to questions to the grant application process, eligibility requirements, and program guidelines. I know the director in particular spends a lot of time going to nonprofit Montgomery, different events, speaking about grants, different public events that he's questioned to go to, Chamber of Commerce meetings. And so, that all is part of the scope of the director and the 5 staff who support the work of OGM. So just want to note as this leads into details about the operations is that there is one vacancy out of the 6 FTEs. It was an administrative specialist position of a grade 23, but OGM is in the process of reclassifying that position to a program specialist too. So we talked a little bit about the OBET analysis, but just as our previous discussion, that that in compliance with the Racial Equity and Social Justice Act passed in 2019, the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice has issued the Office of Grants Management analysis on how its proposed budget and resource allocations support the goal of eliminating and reducing racial inequities. The OGM received a score 8 out of 11, and I will note that it seems like the scoring changes every year. Sometimes it's a narrative score, sometimes it's a numerical score, and so this year it was numerical, and so it was 8 out of 11. The strengths identified through the OBET process was that the office is structured to enable staff to continue conducting their work through the lens of racial equity. All staff participate in the office's core team, and it's a requirement of OGM. So this includes attendance at specific conferences, events, and being able to remain abreast of current funding trends, opportunities that as it relate to addressing disparities. Opportunities that were identified in the OBET responses included the inclusion of follow-ups, and I think this was literally in the narrative, is that they thought it would have been a better score to highlight some of the work that they were doing. And so that mentions there was the addition of the dedicated grants attorney in FY26, and it has enabled the office to legally comply with county and federal equity laws and policies. So I think sometimes that lends itself to the actual writing of the report, is that sometimes the score doesn't just truly reflect what's happening within the department because you just might forget to write it. So I just want to acknowledge that, and I'll stop there to see if there's any other questions. Okay, sorry. And we will continue on page 5. The office, provided an update on the Cornerstone Government Affairs contract. There has been a number of reports that have been shared with the council and that Cornerstone has provided like strategic guidance on, especially regarding the federal funding landscape. There was a detailed analysis of federal funding streams relevant to Montgomery County, and the work with Cornerstone will remain essential as the federal government continues to advance differing positions and priorities regarding programmatic grant funding reductions. So the reports, along with the council being able to receive them and have that information, is that the Office of Intergovernmental Affairs also uses the report to help complement their efforts through their federal delegation, as Cornerstone's overall scope is more than OIR has the bandwidth to deal with. So there are some planned reports already in the pipeline for FY27. So reviewing changes in funding and support for presidential priorities resulting from the midterm elections, any DHS appropriation, so Department of Homeland Security, just to be clear, appropriation passing. So this may be in the county in FY26 or FY27. I won't go through the whole list, but OGM does not plan to immediately analyze the president's recommended budget that was released in April. And so it may be analyzed in the future, but I think as the year goes on, that Cornerstone will be a great assistance, and OGM plans on maintaining that contract.
If I may add to
Yeah,
that,
absolutely.
just from my own experience in the federal government, working in the executive branch there, usually the president's first budget that he puts out there is really the testing ground with Congress, and how it's responded to by Congress really sets the tone for the rest of the administration. So because the president put out all these cuts that he wanted to do, and congressional Republicans rebuked him and funded almost all those programs anyways, it kind of sets the tone that that's not going to happen. So having worked on presidential budgets myself in my career, it's just something, it's less of a formality. It's more of a value statement as opposed to something that's realistically going to happen. That those debates have been had. Our kind of best sense is that it's going to be more continuing resolutions going forward, which in a sense is good in that a lot of these funding streams are going to be maintained that are relevant to Montgomery County. So we will look at the president's budget. It does add value. I think where it adds value is the programs they would like to disrupt through other means. I think it's a roadmap of what they are going to want to do. But in terms of appropriations, it's probably not going to be all that valuable. But we will continue to use Cornerstone. If that changes, they'll be highlighting that for us.
Apologies. So on item number 2, on page 6, we just provided an update on the grant writer contracts. So this began in, when did you start these? In FY26, the grant writer contracts? I'm sorry.
FY24, I believe.
FY24.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. I should have included that in the packet. So OGM has maintained an open solicitation to FY24, hiring grant writing firms to help the departments in some of their grant writings to acquire grants from the federal government and other grant opportunities from foundations that may be available. I think in last year there was 4 grant writing firms that the office was working with, and they plan to work with 3 of them moving into FY27. So I think there were some challenges across the years with with grants that were available and trying to get those to write those grants and get them out of the door. And so, in the packet, the office described the federal funding situation as erratic, which I think it accurately captures what we're seeing. That there were truncated application deadlines, fewer opportunities that were issued and revised and reissued. I can think of one like the Continuum of Care NOFO that the homeless program uses. Went through that it was issued, it was paused, it was reissued, and so, yes, we have seen that across programs. So despite these challenges, departments continue to pursue grant opportunities, although the demand for the contracted grant writing services has declined. And so these contracts are under a task order. So it's like a pay-for-service type of contract that is maintained with the writers. So in FY24, there were 7 grant writer assignments. In FY25, there were 4 grant writer assignments. And then in FY26, there are 1. So as we move into FY27, we will see what the demands of the departments are to utilize the grant writers in pursuing opportunities.
Director Murphy?
And I think part of this also is a lot of the opportunities that we pursued have been smaller. And so, just because that's what's there. And I think you do see more departments engaging and trying to go after grants. And it doesn't make sense to hire a $6,000 or $10,000 grant writer for a $60,000 award. And so my incoming grants team have been able to act as that kind of grants writer for the department and kind of pick that up as bandwidth allows, or even on major awards like the MEA award of $9.1 million that we just won. I hope that's the correct number. 8.8 million or 8.3 million. That was just on my colleague Anu Gupta, coordinated that application. It was a multi-department application. So in that sense, we can fill these grant writer roles with kind of what's coming out there, and it hasn't made sense to invest resources in that. And then because there's a smaller volume of applications that we will be using grant writers, we want to give people enough work that they want to maintain the contract on their end. So by having a smaller pool, we can rotate opportunities through them. So that's a smaller number. If things do settle with the federal government, then yes, we may look at expanding that. But this contract is also open for departments. They can feed their money in. So it's administrative it expedites things administratively. They don't have to set up a new contract for a grant writer. They can just come to OGM and say, hey, we've got our $5,000 here. Can we use your contract to get a grant writer? And we can get a grant writer to a department within a week if they contact us. So that's like one of these shared administrative mechanisms that we maintain that benefits the entire county.
Great. Thank you. And I think you really highlight, as Ms. Clemens Johnson has said, and Director Murphy, as you said, there's both the grants we give out, and then there's the department also works on grants to bring in grants to the county. And so thank you for all your work on that. And I know this assistance is very helpful. Councilmember Katz?
Yes, it is, and thank you for that. And I think it should be noted that the group behind there literally has your back. I just want you to know. And obviously these grant writers are for county departments, et cetera. Is there any mechanism, or should there be some mechanism, that if a nonprofit wants a grant and they can't afford a grant writer, is there a way that we could help out on something like that?
I think that was the part of the intent of the nonprofit strategic planning grant program that you guys put out there in that supplemental appropriation, was to give nonprofits unrestricted funds to fund things like that so that they could go after maybe new opportunities because of diminishing federal resources or federal impacts that require new resources. And so that's something that's very much we encourage. I think one thing with that program that was really hard for nonprofits to wrap their head around was, you're really giving us money for unrestricted expenses. Like, no one does that. And I'm having folks who have worked in the nonprofit world like myself, I mean, no one does that. And so I think that was really something valuable about that program, where we have that mechanism where, okay, there's greater impacts to the federal government, or you're losing federal funds. Here's some unrestricted resources for you to be able to hire things that no grant would ever pay for to do them. So I think that's one of the mechanisms that you guys have put forward.
Okay, thanks.
I think that's the benefit of also having a council member who's been in the nonprofit world and know what a gift unrestricted funds can really be to a nonprofit, especially during these times. So I'm looking forward to when those get out and see what our nonprofits can do with that. Councilmember Evans?
No questions, but just sitting here and listening, it amazes me how much you're able to do and how much you do, and I do appreciate that. And I was just sitting here thinking about the advisory group that we had that was, looking at, ways to do this work where it would be even more beneficial to nonprofits. So I was just thinking about what you were saying, just being reflective and thinking about all that the county has been able to do to support nonprofits. So I'm just appreciative and looking forward to see what more happens. But so just one quick question I did have. So it's down. So we're down to one grant writer. Is that so for the FY26? Is this one grant writer assignment? And am I not looking at that right?
It was one instance of the grant writer contract being used. So we have 4 in our pool of grant writers. Okay. But we were only requested by departments, or maybe we initiated, I forget, in the moment, where that contract was actually utilized.
Okay.
So.
Okay. I saw the different years, the different numbers, so it was making me think that we weren't left with as many. Okay.
And if I can just add to that too is we've been doing a ton of training and support for departments. So I think a department that may have at one point needed a grant writer maybe doesn't anymore because their staff have trained. And I think a lot of departments are being very proactive, and you guys have been approving positions that are grants focused being added to their budget. So they are bringing in or developing in-house expertise where they maybe needed to hire somebody before, but now the person that we've trained or has been to a training that we've sponsored or a new position that was hired with grants expertise, they're able to handle that as well. So I think the training has been a big part of that as well.
Very good. Thanks for noting that. Thank you.
We can continue.
Thank you so much. So we will dig into the budget items. If we look at the bottom of page 6 and page 7, the biggest item for discussion would be the shift of funding, $150,000, excuse me, for the grants management software application. And this shift will happen from 3 departments: environmental protection, transportation, and police, to the Office of Grants Management to help support the departments countywide. So this funding will support the platform that the OGM already uses, which is UNA Solution. The office transitioned to UNA in FY25 and can support both incoming and outgoing grants. So OGM is requesting the funding shift to OGM base to secure the private grants database offered within the incoming grants portion of the software. So basically they have the software, but this is a portion that they would like to utilize that because OGM has found it more useful than originally anticipated. The contract for UNA overall is under the IT commodities contract. Renewal for that portion of UNA is done on a yearly basis. There is no long-term contract binding the departments to the software. Thus, OGM is dependent on the departments for access. So the 3 departments, namely police, EP, and transportation, independently chose UNA in FY25 as well, and approached OGM about sharing one software license instead of the individual organizations having 3 licenses. So what they noted is in the 3 instances, it would have cost each department $150,000 and at least $16,000 in the most basic setup. OGM was able to secure a single instance that all of the departments will be able to use at a cost of $67,804, savings of $98,000 in the first year, while increasing efficiency. So OGM outgoing grants also chose UNA to compete and manage the county outgoing grants, but the private database was not included in that original budgeting plan. There is more detail about the utilization of the departments on page number 8, but I will let Raphael speak as he seems eager to provide additional information.
So with the OGM manages the platform for these 3 departments. We are already paying for an unlimited number of users. The contract is with Montgomery County, again, not with the individual department. So there's a huge savings there. We're not paying for something 3 times that we can pay for once. So with the database, which is a really, really amazing tool that the software provides. There's a lot of great tools for managing grants through UNA that are very useful, which is why DEP, police, and the other department, transportation, wanted to have it. They're very all grants heavy organizations, but this was something that was really useful for a lot of other departments to go look at private funding opportunities, foundations and whatnot. And so OGM has been using it ourselves because we have access to kind of, just as we search for grants.gov, just where we search for grants opportunities and farm those out to departments to apply for. We do that with private opportunities now, and we send those out. So we currently have $150,000 in awards that are under negotiation now that we found on this database and we farmed out to these other departments. What we want to do by making this transfer is to give departments direct access to all of this functionality, whether it's grants management, doing their own grant searches, searching this private database. OAS, Recreation are 2 departments who very much should be looking at the private foundation space, libraries as well, to be finding these opportunities. So instead of OGM having to do that, they can just go in and look for that themselves and do it. One thing I just do want to point out on Circle 10 in the handout is we've also been leveraging this database to provide opportunity. I'm sorry, Circle 11 is at the bottom is to provide nonprofits awareness of other funding opportunities outside the county. So to date, in FY26, we've distributed almost $72 million in non-county funding opportunities through the OGM newsletter. It's the reason why that newsletter is about 25 pages long is because there's a lot of funding opportunities. We've had 314 notices. 58 of them have focused on climate change and 78 on racial equity. So if the federal government is not going to support climate change, racial equity, OGM is doing what it can to help our nonprofit partners find other funders who do support these initiatives. So this is not something that's in our scope for the incoming grants team. They do it because it's important and, you know, it helps our nonprofit partners. But that's a huge benefit that we provide to them is to do these, have this tool to do these searches and distribute the results. So not just our departments can apply for these opportunities, but can our nonprofits find alternative opportunities to, you know, outside of the federal sphere or the county sphere.
Great, thank you for that update. That's, I think, a great resource to provide. Appreciate that. I don't think I ever get that far down in the, the newsletter that you all send out because it's multiple pages. I think I focus on the NOFOs you all are doing, but that's really helpful. Thank you. Any questions on that? No? All right. Oh, yeah, Councilmember Evans.
So I do have a question, and I don't even know if it's really relevant, but so you know how you said you're transferring and you're allowing other departments to be able to use it. Is there like a set number of users that can have access to it?
There is, but at the price we're already paying, we're already exceeding the universal number of users. And from OGM's base budget, you approved an increase last year to give us access to the outgoing grants module as part of UNA. So we're already paying the exact same amount of money. Just shifting it over to OGM budget just gives every department access.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. No, I just asked the question because I was wondering if other departments wanted to have access, if they would actually be able to. Because sometimes when you purchase that, it limits the number of users or people that can access it. That's why I asked that question.
No, that's a good question to ask because that was something we looked at when we were working with these three departments to get the software set up. And it was a very limited, and then especially when we wanted to add the outgoing module, the cost of the price difference of the number of users versus like spending like a tiny bit more to get universal access. And now other departments have seen, you know, police, DEP and DOT pilot the software. Now they're interested, say, not, you know, for the search functions, but also more just the grants management functions.
Sure.
Like, hey, we see that, you know, police is saying this is a good platform, DOT is having good success with it or using it. Can we use it now too? So I think that's a lot of it is just they're seeing other departments having good experiences and they want access too. And so for $0, we can give them that.
Yeah, okay, good. That's why I asked the question in case somebody else was interested in another department. Okay, thank you.
Great. Anything else?
Nothing else for the Office of Grants Management other than the miscellaneous increases related to like personnel and compensation adjustments. So that is all.
Great. Awesome. Anything else, Director Murphy?
If you don't mind, I'd like to go through the one-pagers that we did just to kind of highlight the scale of the work that we're doing.
Yes.
Because I think even the packet's called the Office of Community Grants versus Office of Grants Management. Yeah. But if you look at Circle 9 in terms of the value, we've helped win $46 million of direct assistance where we've been directly involved. Now, there's a lot of departments who don't need our help, and that's great. You know, they're winning grants, but the ones who are new to the grants game, we are working with them closely. Just in FY26 alone, we've pulled in $9 million. And with one single award, we've pulled in, if we're looking at general fund revenue, which is obviously something we need these days, you know, in terms of collecting IDC, the OGM incoming grants team, which is 50% of me and two colleagues, we've more than paid for ourselves in terms of bringing in general fund revenue. So that's going to be something going forward. It's going to be very important is making sure we collect that indirect cost so that we do maintain this, you know, a robust compliance support. You know, we've worked through 62 million of applications. I think the figure I really want to point to is the FY25 federal award expenditures of $232 million. To replace that money, when we did the calculations based on what was presented in the April 7th packet, you'd have to raise property taxes by 8.9%. Or if that's not acceptable, you could raise income tax by 0.95%. So, I mean, this really talks about.
Say if that's not acceptable.
So obviously that isn't, and that's why the work of OGM is important in terms of really supporting departments and making sure we hold on to every federal dollar we can. And quite frankly speaking, after attending the National Grants Management Association conference about a month ago with a delegation of 14 Montgomery County government staff, I mean, this is, we are much better positioned thanks to the investments that you guys have put in with the Cornerstone reports, the Cornerstone analysis, with the grants-focused attorney last year, with the training funds that you've put in previous years. We are far better positioned than most jurisdictions. And I don't really do optimism, but I will say that we are far better prepared for the current situation than most of their jurisdictions. And I could see us growing our federal funds because we can support departments and really aggressively going after them, where I think a lot of other jurisdictions are just going to put their hands up and say, this is too complex, we can't deal with it. As we've talked about, we've distributed almost $1 billion in grants opportunities to departments for them to consider applying for. We have a map of their priorities for the ones who kind of give it to us, and if we find something on grants.gov and from the state, from private foundation, we send it to them. So and maybe not every opportunity is the right one to apply for, but we are sending a lot out to departments to find other sources of revenue for the programs and services that our residents need. And again, just like with this private foundation search, we've got $150,000 of awards under negotiation right now. So even the shift, even if it was new funding, that software is kind of paid for itself in terms of new money that we're bringing in. If we shift to Circle 10, what we're really focused on, and again, if we want to go back to the Cornerstone report, yes, the congressional Republicans did rebuke the president. Yes, they did fund all these opportunities. Those congressional Republicans aren't going to care if the priorities of their criteria is shifted in ways that doesn't match Montgomery County values. So we're going to have to be helping our departments be very nimble in their language. And this is something the CE is 100% supportive of, is we're going to go after everything. If we have to change language, if we have to reclassify our priorities to make it more palatable to the new administration, we will, because we're going to get that money for our residents. There are red lines. We have not, we've heard of them. We're not going to cross them, but we have not been asked to cross them yet. We see a lot of funny language, and this is like, again, the value of the grants attorney that you approved last year, and the value of our staff expertise is to help departments navigate those. And we've had at least three incidences where a department was not going to apply, and we helped them understand this is actually not what you think it is. We can apply, and OCA has been able to quickly affirm that we can apply. So that's an incredible value there. But we're trying to build a compliance culture. We've had 49 at a training event that you guys supported through previous budgets. We had 49 MCG staff at that. We had brought in a professional grants trainer to train them on how to manage federal awards. We had 14 attend the National Grants Management Association conference. It was a 4-day event in DC. We're lucky to have the National Grants Conference, 7 metro stops down from us. That's a great access. And we distributed 51 professional memberships to Grants Management, Grants Professionals Association and the Grants Management Association. So they have access to throughout the year ongoing grants trainings. And we do a lot to help teams. We have 96 MSG staff on the team site where we distribute and circulate information to keep everyone in the loop on what's going on with the federal government. We do a lot of announcements of changes, and we have got the federal consulting reports. So this is just what 2.5 staff do, and really less than that because it's for the county government. So we are a very, very small but mighty team. But these 2 staff do not really work in the outgoing portfolio. All they're doing is bring money in and protect it. So a lot of great work there. If we go to Circle 11, then we pivot to outgoing grants. This is grants that the county puts out. So the way it was characterized was that we are doing, that community grants is our bread and butter, and the departments are actually the side things we do. I would say it's become the opposite, and the numbers point to that. So if we look at even FY26, we've given $42 million out as grants. And then if you're looking at through competitions, if we're looking at renewing multiple-year awards, that's an extra $14 million. So that's a huge volume of awards in terms of dollar amount. In terms of how much money we get, so far we've gotten requests. We've gotten over $82 million in requests. So the need is always higher than the money we have to give, and that's just the reality of it. In terms of applications, we've processed 503 this year. We work with 7 different departments outside of the Community Grants NDA to put their grants programs out as grant competitions, so the procurement contracts. So again, as a former nonprofit leader to another, there's a huge difference between a grant and a procurement contract and how that works. Of the 23 competitions that we've done this year, and we've done 20, or we're projected to do 23, only 2 of them have come from the Community Grants NDA. All the other 21 are from departments. And if we look at the renewals, 11 of those are department-funded grant programs, only 3 are from the NDA. So the vast majority of our work is working with departments and helping them put things out as grants. The Community Grants NDA is really kind of a smaller portion, a much smaller portion of our budget. And the last section of this I've already talked about in terms of how we've been pumping out non-county opportunities, to the tune of $71 million to our nonprofits to help them find alternative funding sources. So we are doing a lot. It's just like the scale of our operations. Even when we developed these sheets, I was kind of stunned with, oh, this is what we're doing. And then the outgoing team is, 3.5 folks, with me being the 0.5. So just wanted to highlight, I like the scale of our work.
I appreciate this a great deal. And, I think is this committee over the last 3.5 years, and we said this to Director Anderson the other day at Human Resources, and by the way, you may want to steal a trick from her. She prints these out and puts them on our desk, her one-pagers, so we make sure we see them. But I just want to say to you, Director Murphy, I know over the last few years, when you came into the Office of Grants Management, new office, setting everything up, and we did have issues, and we still are working on them on the community grants. And unfortunately, much of our time on this committee is always focused on the issues we need to iron out, and highlighting this work that you just did of what your team is doing and what you've been able to build over the last 3.5 years is really incredible. And so I just want to say thank you so much for the partnership, the hard work, and continuing to really serve not just our departments, but our entire community. I think this is outstanding. So thank you so much. Councilmember Evans?
I agree. Oh my goodness. And when you said 2.5 people, this is a lot. So I'm glad that you had us come down to allow you to state out loud what you all have been able to accomplish. So this is phenomenal. Thank you.
Councilmember Katz.
Yeah, I'm good. I too want to thank you. From where we were to where we are is truly night and day. So very impressive.
Great. Thank you very much, and thanks to the team, some of whom are here. And so Ms. Clemens Johnson, I think we're good to go.
Yes, we are.
Yeah. All right. Without objection, we will pass this on to the County Council, and hopefully you'll be on the consent item so you don't have to come before the full council. So I think that is it for that item, and now we will move on to the cost sharing. All right, Ms. Clemens Johnson.
Thank you. I just want to preface our discussion of this particular staff report and note that there are a few errors, and I will take that responsibility as that there was a lack of communication between myself and the Office of Management and Budget. And so I hope you will be patient with me, is that I will walk through some of the numbers, but after we have this meeting, I will immediately update the packet so that the public and anyone else who needs to access this information will have the correct information. So it will be revised online, and at full council, we will make sure that all of the numbers are accurate. And OMB is minded best friends now, and so we will talk and commune and have hugs and make sure the numbers are right. So yes. So I will start on page 1, and like I said, bear with us because there are significant changes that are based on, just some information that we had. So the county executive is recommending a reduction of $900,000 for the FY27 operating budget for the cost sharing MCG. So this is a 14% decrease. There's a narrative that the cost sharing project is for the development of non-governmental projects where county funding leverages private and other public funds for the project. Just a summary of the CE ads, and these are correct, is that CASA Incorporated is recommended for $2.5 million. There is $3.5 million recommended for the competitive capital grants process, and also $200,000 for the Charles E. Smith Life Communities Reimagining Ring House for $200,000. And we will talk about that more as we dig into the budget items. Just want to note on April 21st, the county executive transmitted amendments to the capital improvements program, including the creation of a new standalone project for the Glen Echo Spanish Ballroom renovations supported previously by funds in the cost-sharing MCD project. So that recommended shift for FY 27,000 is $3.25 million in current revenue, and that was awarded in FY 25. And then there was state award in FY 26 of $1.5 million, and so there's just a suggestion that it be its own project. I believe because it's a new project, it has to go through the public hearing process, and then we will, which I think is set for a date in May. I just got an email about it, but we will, I will certainly provide that update to the committee, and I could update this packet with that information with the revised version. And so I imagine that we will talk about it at full council instead of having to schedule a separate committee work session. So if we turn to page 2, I'm still making corrections if we look at our chart. So the FY26 approved amount by the county council was actually $6.4 million. $4.9 million was the amount that was originally recommended when we received the budget. During the committee work session, you all approved the CE's recommended amount, and then also recommended that money in 3 tranches be considered by the full council for reconciliation. So there was a tranche of $1 million. There was and then there was 2 tranches of $500,000. So 3 tranches altogether would have totaled $2 million. The council ended up approving 2 of the tranches, $1 million and $500,000. So the total increase from the 4.9, including the $1.5 million, took the FY26 approved amount to $6.4 million. And then also the FY27 CE recommended amount is actually $5.5 million. Just based on the PDF that came over the project description for the cost sharing grants, it wasn't clear in the narrative versus what was spelled out in the budget about the direct appropriation compared to the capital grants, competitive grants funding that was recommended. And so we will dig into that as we talk about the FY27 items. So those are the large changes. We will make sure that that is revised for everyone. So as we move into updates, so for 2026, the General Assembly end of season, per the Office of Intergovernmental Relations report, the Montgomery County capital projects funded for FY27 is $172.6 million in new state investments coming to the county. Just for a point of reference, FY26 funding was $134.9 million. So this includes $54 million for public school construction and $118.5 million for other important infrastructure projects, health facilities, community revitalization, arts and culture, housing, parks, recreation, libraries, and other. There is a full list on Circle 6 of this packet, and I'm sure OIR went over that when you guys had your state ledge updates. And so I want to thank DGS and the Office of Grants Management for providing updates on the cost sharing grantees. And so we took it back to FY25 and to note that the Glen Echo Spanish Ballroom, which I mentioned is transitioning, that no funds have been encumbered or expended for the Spanish Ballroom yet, as they were waiting on state aid. So the 3.25 was in current revenue, and then the state aid amount, it was that we just referenced, 1.5 million. So that funding just hasn't been received yet. And then the Sex and Gender Minorities Health Center project for $500,000. That funding has fully been dispersed and closed out. And then the Identity Headquarters and Community Health Center for $500,000. That funding has been fully dispersed and closed out as well. So as we moved into the FY26 cost sharing grantees, the Scotland AME Zion Church Second Century project for $400,000. That funding has been fully dispersed and closed out as well. So one thing I asked the DGS and the Office of Grants Manager just for their feedback, but it's mainly DHHS. It's some just policies and procedures about how they handle the projects within the cost sharing project. So I asked them about delays, like what happens and how do they manage delays or scope changes or failures to complete. And it was reported to me that those are actually rare, that through the timeline for some of their multi-year projects just may be slightly longer. So DHHS regularly assists organizations with setting up their invoices and ensuring they are properly paid so that the work can be completed. So they said extensions do occur, but in FY26, OGM and DHHS switched to a more realistic grants term that has largely eliminated the need for extensions. So overall, switching exclusively to that state-matched awards process in FY25 has largely eliminated the historical issues with the delays or the non-usage of funds. So it actually goes back to our conversations about the standardization and how implementing those standards about that grant process has been helpful in making sure that we are able to utilize the funds timely.
Ms. Clemens Johnson, and maybe I heard you, but it's DGS that's doing this, not Health and Human Services, right?
Yes,
okay.
DGS.
I just wanted to
yes.
make sure. I think you had a long day yesterday with HHS.
Maybe I said HHS.
I just want to make sure all of us are here, understand, because it's DGS that does this. So
yes, yeah.
I don't want to give HHS a heart attack. They
Yes,
got enough on their plates. And so just wanted to clarify.
Thank you for catching me. I'm operating on fumes. So thank you so much. So, so DGS, yes. So we'll just end that conversation there. That just largely, thankfully for the standardization, they are just seeing more stable and effective awards. So also asked about the management of awards and accountability, like what are the processes for making sure that people are utilizing the funds in the way that they were supposed to and appropriately and timely. And so it was noted that the FY26 capital sharing grant agreements include the standard accountability mechanisms that is built across grant agreements that the county put out. And there are some additional measures for capital awards. So in short, these mechanisms ensure that the funds provided have been used for the appropriate purpose and that additional reimbursements requests cover appropriate expenses. And so just the monitoring of the grants and how those funds are used. So we note in the bullets at the bottom of the page that while awardees are entitled up to 30% upfront payment once funds are encumbered, there are a number of provisions that are set in our administrative procedures that govern how the funds are supposed to be used. So I won't go through all of them, but I just wanted to note them in the packet in terms of how that helps the department, both DGS and OGM, in managing the funds. And so when a grant agreement is ready to be closed, either after a successful project completion or the county's termination, DGS will liquidate that purchase order and close the agreement with the approval of the Office of Management and Budget. And before we get into discussion items, I'll just stop there to see if there's any questions, comments. Okay. So for the budget items for FY27, all of these could be considered for the reconciliation list if there are changes that the committee would like to make. So the first that we will dig into is the recommendation for CASA Incorporated of $2.5 million. The FY27 funding reflects $2 million in federal aid and $500,000 in county funding. Just a background that this is a project that the county has been working in coordination with the CASA for some time. In FY23, through a supplemental appropriation, the $5 million was provided to support the renovations at 14646 Rothbard Drive in Rockville, Maryland. This actually used to be the county's animal shelter, and CASA has a lease with us to utilize the facility for their Workforce Development Center. And so at that center, they provide employment and training centers services to low-income residents so they can access long-term meaningful employment. So according to DGS, the current amount left unpaid for FY23 is $860,967. Renovations are currently in process. The latest invoice to CASA dated January 2026 was for the training center phase 2 of the Welcome Center. So for the FY27 funding recommended It will contribute to the overall renovation project that is ongoing. So based on the updated information shared by CASA to DGS in FY 2026, if we flip to page 5, there will be 5 vocational training labs, 2 vocational training classrooms, a work center for day laborers, additional windows, gender-neutral bathrooms, space for private consultations with the public, and improving the reception and waiting areas, ADA accessibility for an elevator, and a community flex space for the office and CASA staff. So the recommendation from the executive is the $2.5 million for FY27.
Great. And just to underscore, we received will receive the $2 million from the federal aid. So from county funds, it's the $500,000.
Correct.
Okay. Just so as we're looking at things.
Good to clear that up.
Yeah. So, okay. I think we can move on to the next item.
Okay. For item 1.2 is the FY27 cost sharing capital grants, $3 million. The CE recommends $1 million for the arts and facilities grants in the initial CIP submission, and a further $2 million for non-arts capital grants projects through the operating budget submission. So OGM, as we talked about that standardization of their process, has opened a FY27 cost sharing capital grant stage 1 opportunity, where I believe it's just a simple, like, 1-page application where they acknowledge that they have received state funding and would like to pursue a cost sharing grant with the county. So that opened on April 14th, and there is, if you access the packet online, there is a link to the NOFO. So I'm going to talk a little bit about item number 1.3 because it is relative to item number 1.2. On the project, if we look at on the project description for the cost sharing for this project, it's on Circle 1. There are direct appropriations that happen that we just talked about. So like last year, there was the direct appropriation for like Scotland, AME that we talked about. And in the project, like in the cost sharing grants narrative portion, there is usually some direct appropriation, as I just mentioned. And then there's also mention of the cost sharing capital grants, as mentioned in here, that there's $3 million, and it is defined as being used for a competitive grant process managed by the Office of Grants Management. My understanding is that for this year, the funding requested for the Charles E. Smith Reimaging Ring House of $200,000 will actually pull from the $2 million in non-arts capital projects that is supposed to be part of the competitive process. So if approved, that would mean that the actual funding available for the non-arts capital projects would be $1.8 million. So I did have this conversation with OMB to understand what was happening and how that, and so I understand that there have been revisions to the project, and that may have been a last minute decision. So it is a bit confusing because as outlined in the project is that those funds are used for competitive funds. And so if we're stating that we're going to pull or say that this organization is getting a direct appropriation from competitive funds, it does reduce the amount of funding available for the public to apply for these grants. So I just would like to note that it wasn't really clear in the PDF. I'm glad that OMB had the conversation. They are free to add any additional information, but I did want to state that so that the committee was aware.
Great. Thank you. I don't know if OMB wanted to chime in or if that covered it.
Sure. So, hi, Mahanur Anjum, Office of Management and Budget. So, cost share capital grants are exclusive to organizations that already have a state matched award. The state funding for the Ring House project was identified in Governor's allowance back in January. So we had information that the state has committed some funds to this particular project. So while we were developing the budget, county executive went ahead and had a direct appropriation to this particular project to show county support for it.
But why is it being taken out of the pot? Why wasn't it just added as a request for $200,000? And why is it being taken out at this time when we've already put the NOFO out of the competitive grants? I guess that's the question. I'm not sure I understand. In the past, like Scotland or the Spanish Ballroom, we've done this, but they've also been line items. So, yes.
Rachel Supplement, Office of Management Budget. As you all can appreciate, the pressure on current revenue and cash equivalents in the county executive's recommendation is extremely tight in March. And so there was a decision in order to provide as much capacity as possible and to minimize the revenue increases required to support the operating budget, to be judicious with the allocation as much as possible here. And so for that reason, it was recommended that it come out of the $2 million allocation. As you all are also aware, that amount is subject to change as it moves through the council approval process. And so, it is a moving target until council approval as to how much is going to be available at the beginning of the year for these non-capital arts grants projects.
Great. I guess I have just sort of an issue with us saying we have a competitive process. This is how much money we're going to budget for it, and we're saying we're taking this $200,000 out of that pot of money. That's what I'm hearing is the justification. So I would actually move that the $200,000 is put on the rec list as it should, and that we keep the $2 million in the capital grants. And then, yeah. Is that good? Or,
You need a second?
all right. Yeah, Councilmember Evans. Yeah.
Did you need a second for that, or we're just moving it over?
I think we could do it with no objection.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. If that's it,
that's
okay.
fine.
All right. I think it's just cleaner. I think it's a little confusing, especially since we've already put the NOFO out, and we have thanks to our amazing Montgomery County delegation and Senator Craig Zucker for all his work. The amount of money that Montgomery County is seeing from the state has increased, and we have a lot of community partners who have been told that you must go through a competitive process. I know I have folks in my district, I'm sure everyone, and the minute the NOFO went out, we sent that out to folks. We thought there was, in the county executive's budget, $2 million. I think there's some confusion here, and I think we should rectify that. So I think this is a good plan moving forward. And I think more information on, I think, in times past, when we've looked at the cost sharing, we've received ahead of time a little bit more information about specific projects. This is the first this morning. Right. I think is the first we're digging into this, and I know there's a lot of back and forth, and you all have been working on it. But I would appreciate more information about the Charles E. Smith Life Communities and the money that's going for this in the project. So is that good with you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. All right.
Okay, so acknowledging the vote of the committee, and council staff will work with OMB on the full council packet to make sure that we include the information requested by the committee.
Great.
And so our conversation kind of led into 1.3, but I will just read for reference, for public reference, that yes, there's a request for the $200,000 for the reimaging ring house. So the Charles E. Life community is embarking on a ring house reservation project to modernize the independent living facility. It is located in Rockville, Maryland, and this initiative aims to reimagine the existing ring house to enhance the living experience for older adults within their 38-acre campus. And so the state approved FY27 capital funding of $950,000, and just wanted to note that. So when we go to full council, we will include additional information.
Great. And I do want to specify that my comments before were not a reflection on the Charles E. Smith Life Communities and the work that they do. It's more our process and making sure it's clear. So yes, it's budgetary. They do great work. Yes. And I hope we can figure this out in this budget for them. So thank you. Any other comments? Or? No, I think we're good.
Yes, we are all good. Thank you so much.
All right. I guess with that, we'll move forward with this, with our changes that we made to the full council. That is our last item for today. I just want to thank everyone. Again, thank you OMB for all your work as we go through this. I know we have quite a lot to do in a short amount of time, and appreciate the responsiveness. And again, Director Murphy, thank you so much. As we have said, I think all morning, we are just very impressed by the work in your office and appreciate the partnership moving forward. And Ms. Clemens-Johnson, you've had 2 really long days, so I hope you can catch your breath this afternoon, and thank you for the excellent work that you always do. So with that, we are adjourned.